Thank you, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I apologize for that picture. I'm much better looking now. That's pre-COVID. All right. So I have a rather long title called Rethinking Economic Growth, Resilience, Inclusivity and Sustainability. Uh, this is quite normal when you're looking for a job because these are the kinds of words that will help you paper over the need to go over any substance. But I don't want to focus on that. I want to actually interrogate the first word here, rethinking. That presupposes thinking. Have we thought about one of these four things in any systematic way in this country? Do we have any kind of policy direction? By which I mean, I think we have a very clear policy direction in the Ministry of Home Affairs in India. I don't know if you agree with me, but I'm a great admirer of the Home Ministry. We have sorted Jammu and Kashmir, we have built a temple or two. I presume the Uniform Civil Code is coming. Home Ministry is doing its job, man, right? But what's happening with the rest? With the Finance Ministry? I ask this because I hear a lot of talk, not from the Finance Ministry, God bless us, except in the beginning of the Finance Minister's speech, about Viksit Bharat, 2047, 2050, $10 trillion economy, 2060, and that sort of thing, which is very nice. I have a small problem with it. I'll be dead by then for sure, unless something happens in genetics. So I'm more interested in sort of humbler timeframes like 2030 or even 2028. If I ask anybody in the following institutions, the Ministry of Finance, the Reserve Bank of India, the Niti Aayog, the Prime Minister's Office, or the Chief Economic Advisor, what will India's growth rate be in 2028? I have no answer. Will agriculture, the size of agriculture be bigger or smaller in 2028? I have no answer. And this worries me. So there is, I think, I'd submit to you the need to think a little bit about economic growth, certainly about resilience from a very dire situation, about sustainability because it's important for us to take account not just of planetary boundaries, but also of social boundaries, and obviously, therefore, of inclusivity. But all this involves understanding the backdrop against which we are asking these questions, and that backdrop is very dire. And the last thing we need is a public policy, not just government, a public policy environment that is drunk on the Kool-Aid of Viksit Bharat 2047. That I'm happy to leave to you. I will speak up to 2030. Let me tell you something I already know. I'm part of a global research program. I know, and I'm speaking here to people who have entered adulthood since 2015, that you have one thing now in common both with people like you in America, in England, in Japan, and with common people in India that I did not have in common with them. What you have in common with them is very depressing and frightening. We can change it. For the first time in the history of the world since the early 20th century, the prosperity of the current generation, unless you had legacy assets, that is, mummy and papa left you a flat or some gold or some land, the current generation is going to be less prosperous than the previous generation. This is a profoundly depressing fact, and it's happening globally. When my great-grandfather moved to Bombay in the early 1900s, my grandfather expected to be more prosperous than him. He was. My father expected to be more prosperous than my grandfather. He was. And I, thank God, am much more prosperous than my father ever was. That has now changed for you. And this is true all over the world, and it is true across income classes. So this is one very worrying thing we have to think of when we think of these four words. I say this to you and I underline it because it means it is no longer something that you can be blasé about or use on your CVs to pass interviews. It's about your life and your future. Securing growth, inclusivity, prosperity in a sustainable fashion is something that you need to take firmly in your hands and do because we have failed to give it to you as our legacy. Only those of you who have legacy of assets from your families will be able to weather this storm. The rest of you are in for a tough time. But there is good news for Indians. You see, in my generation, when we talked about developing the country, it wasn't about us, you see. It so happened we developed ourselves, at least my generation did, beyond anyone's wildest expectations. That was a fluke. When we public policy-minded people talked about developing people, it was about developing other people. It was not about developing me. I was okay. I went to a good college. I got a good degree, you know, and then things got better and better. India opened up. I became globally mobile. I started eating sushi, right? And all these lovely things happened, celebrating Halloween, I'm told now in Ashoka University, and not in Geetham, thank God. And that sort of thing. You guys, we got beautifully globalized, our lives became globalized, and my prosperity exceeded any previous generation's wildest imaginations. If your prosperity declines, and it's happening everywhere, you for the first time now, if you're going to live in this country, if you're going to get out, fine, but it won't help you much, you can see from Trump. It'll maybe help you a little more than staying here. You have common cause to make now with people who have never been prosperous. Those of you who don't have legacy. And for me, I would interpret inclusion for you in those terms. For me, inclusion meant I must include somebody in the benefits I am enjoying. For you, it means I must be included with other people to get the benefits that previous generations enjoyed and I do not enjoy. It is therefore as much a social quest as a technocratic or economic one. And I would urge you, therefore, to think about the solutions to this, not technocratically. And I say this because in India, we are a country which is a very, very strange country. I had when I was teaching in England, some people came to visit me, Indians. And they had a very bright kid, actually Telugu kid, very bright. And the boy wanted to be a radio astronomer. Exoplanetary radio astronomer, which is looking for life in outside boundaries, etc. He had the talent, everything. And his mother came to me in tears and said, please tell this boy not to do this. Tell him to become an engineer. And I was like, madam, your child is a genius. He wants to be an exoplanetary astronomer. Why do you want him to become a mechanical engineer? It's disgusting. The same thing happens with me. When I became an economist, somebody met my father and said, oh, I'm sorry, your son couldn't get into chartered accountancy. So these are sort of workaday things that have become part of our education process. You're all familiar with it as young people. I've talked to enough of you in this university to know that you knew that your life trajectories could have been different. But very often you were forced into doing things for job, for family, etc. Right? And the good news for you is these things ain't working anymore. We have unemployed engineers en masse in this country. Doctors earn very little, except a reified few. They become more or less, if you look at the income distribution of doctors and the income distribution of lawyers, they're the same. The top 5% earns enough to buy private planes. The bottom 95 earn less than me. Okay? So these traditional high-earning disciplines have, to a large extent, become non-high-earning disciplines. What is your option, therefore? I'm pointing out if you're not inclusive, resilient, sustainable as a social project. You, not just people poorer than you. Your option, therefore, is to go and work like people did in my great-grandfather's days for the East India Company. I read a report today in the New York Times. I was just telling people here that that report said that about 2 million jobs are coming to India because of Donald Trump. These 2 million jobs are very exciting. Lots of them are going to come to Hyderabad and Vizag, hopefully. I was just writing to our President Bharat about this. These are not, IT low-end jobs. These are interesting jobs. The best example I can give you is there's a guy who's visually impaired who's been hired by an American firm to actually prepare software and aids to help American people who are visually impaired open parcels and deal with correspondence, right? So these are all jobs where you will pay taxes. And remember, in India, you have to earn 6 times the per capita income to pay income tax. So you'll be okay if you get one of these jobs. But these are jobs that are entirely dependent on the whims and fancies. Very odd thing to be saying in a country that's so nationalistic, apparently. Because I'm not a nationalist, I'm a patriot. There's a difference. That American companies are now going to decide what the good jobs are. Thanks to Mr. Donald Trump, who is not letting these people emigrate like my cohort did. I mean, those of you Andhra, you know that. Go to San Diego. It's like being in Malakpet. Or for that matter, sell stuff to them that is cheaper than what they can produce, because there are going to be tariffs and there are going to be immigration boundaries. So companies will relocate here, and that's an opportunity, sure. But is it an opportunity that's going to give you a growth trajectory? Or is it going to substitute for the engineering and medicine and chartered accountancy jobs that your parents aspired to. Probably the former, but much more volatilely. Unless, therefore, we are able to get out of this business of thinking about the country's inclusivity, prosperity, sustainability technocratically, and unless we are able to think about how we can make these things happen by changing the way in which people in this society behave, I think it will be very difficult for us to make the kind of progress that I would like to see in your lives, not in 2050 or 47, it'll be too late even for you by then. Then we are talking about unborn fetuses, but in 2030. Because I wish to be old and I wish to die old and content, and there's nothing for a teacher like me that contents me more than to see you live long and prosper. But that prosperity involves for the first time action by you, not action by anybody else. You will have to act to be prosperous. And you'll have to act to change the terms and conditions under which you are allowed to be prosperous in that this country affords you. That is possible to do. But that will involve having a great deal more empathy about those who are not with you, and a great deal more solidarity, and a great deal more attention paid to political action and social action as opposed to technocratic action than you're either trained to do or society currently allows. Let me give you one example of a way to trivialize political action that economists love to use. I don't know how many of you have heard of this absurdity called nudge units. They're patronizing things that are very popular in the Niti Aayog and in many governments across the world. A nudge unit is patronizing because it presumes you're an idiot. And it presumes that there are smart people who sit in government who know what the best outcome for you is, and then they try and nudge you into behaving in a way that secures that outcome. So, for example, you could think of a nudge unit as, if you're a smoker, the nudge unit in government will spend money to get smart people to nudge you towards stopping to smoke. But when you have a systemic, cross-generational, global crisis of prosperity, and what can be less inclusive than a crisis of prosperity where the young are expected to be less prosperous than the old? What can be less sustainable than a globe where the young are to be less prosperous than the old? Right? And what is more demeaning to resilience than a world in which the young are less prosperous than the old? Nudges will not work in that world. You will need to take whole action, and that involves 3 or 4 things from you. One, and I'm very impressed with the students I teach in this respect, you guys are much smarter than I am or ever was, or many of my cohorts were much smarter. And you're smarter because you have managed very successfully, I congratulate you, to privatize the learning business. And you've done it very effectively. So when, as happened this morning, it frequently happens to me, a student in my class and I'm explaining something complex and I prepared 20 minutes to explain it because that is what the last cohort I taught 20 years ago before I became a diplomat and worked in government. They took 20, 25 minutes to understand the difference between domestic and international debt in this case, foreign debt. They got an 8. And I said, how do you know? Because they said, well, we look at YouTube, we look at social media when we prepare for your class. And they look, and what I would urge you to do therefore is to use that wealth of knowledge you have to look beyond your areas of domain expertise and to interrogate one very important word which has gone, and which has gone for a long time, and that is solidarity and fraternity, which I want to spend a minute on before I conclude. In a world where your prosperity is going to be less than that of your parents unless you have virasat, legacy, solidarity and fraternity become essential. This country is not known for solidarity and fraternity, and you know who recognized this? Our Indian Constitution. And Dr. Ambedkar, who has written a brilliant essay on it, it's called On Fraternity. I recommend it to you. The Indian Constitution, you will notice in its preamble, says that the state, the government, shall strive to ensure liberty, secure inequality, and promote fraternity. It therefore acknowledges that the government cannot secure fraternity. You have to secure fraternity. The government can help you promote it. It can create conditions for you to secure fraternity. And what can be a lower fraternity society than India across the world? You know, I was looking at some data points and I said, I'm sick of hearing how the South is more prosperous than the North. Why don't you tell me, let me look for some places where the South behaves exactly like the North. And I'll tell you where it does. You've been to Hyderabad. Hyderabad's per capita income is whatever it is. So is Kerala. So is Tamil Nadu. Okay? More than Indonesia. UP is less than Nepal. You've heard it all before. But I'll tell you two things in common with these states. They drive scooters the wrong way of the road. They break traffic lights. Okay? And you'll find scooters carrying 3 or 4 people and people not wearing helmets. So despite high human development, despite high per capita income, this is the level of fraternity you have. If you observe how people drive, I can't drive in India anymore. There is no basic fraternity in how we drive, or how we board an aircraft, or how we interact with each other. This has a lot to do with the caste system. This has a lot to do with why Ambedkar didn't talk about alleviating the caste system. He talked about annihilating it. And I really commend that essay of Ambedkar's to you, to be able to understand why I'm urging you to think about fraternity. And here I'm afraid my technical training as an economist didn't help me, and your technical training as an engineer or a doctor or an architect or a lawyer is not going to help you. The good news is that nothing much else will, except a broad reading and reflection on the subject. You will not find this the subject of Instagram posts. You will not find this the subject of TikTok reels. You will not find this a subject of discussion on Twitter. You will find it a subject which you see every day on the street before your eyes, if only you open them to reflect on it. And I would urge you to reflect on it very hard, because in my opinion, if there was ever a museum of non-inclusivity, non-equality, non-sustainability to be built, I would build that museum in our Bharat. Okay, India also. And the reason I'm saying that is, think of an inequality, and you will have it here in spades. Intergenerational inequality, hereditary inequality. Have you heard of any other country where even the film industry is hereditary? The film industry in this country is hereditary. I mean, that's absurd. That's almost comic. But it's a fact. I mean, you're living in Tollywood. Just look around you. Okay? Then they marry and become politicians and all that. But I mean, it's the fact. I'm not saying they're bad politicians. I'm just saying it is so. Right? And if you know, Abhishek Bachchan, Amitabh Bachchan, now Shah Rukh Khan is launching his children. So it's not just politicians. Every profession in this country is profoundly hereditary, right? That is going to detract from fraternity. The condition of women detracts from fraternity. You're not much better off being a woman in Kerala than being a woman in UP. You still get, stared at, molested, etc. And therefore, it is important to take these conditions of fraternity as being really things that we need to change in society if we are to regain resilience, if we are to be more sustainable, and if we are going to be more inclusive. To conclude, the big difference, always remember, is I could say this about other people and improving other people to become like me. But this, from now till your late adulthood, is all about you. Good luck. Thank you.